don't got it, you don't want it. Come on in.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Hey kids, welcome to Grumpy Nostalgia, the Second Look Cinema podcast, the show where we go back to that blockbuster new release full of our memory, we grab a copy off the shelf, we pop it in our VCR, and we see what time has done to it. I'm Justin, that's Mike.
Hola, ¿qué tal?
And together we're here to help you navigate all those landmines littered down memory lane. So Mike, this is a special episode. Before we get too far ahead, for a couple reasons. One, the show hit a milestone that we just completely glossed over. Last show was our 100th episode.
Oh, good for you!
We passed through with no fanfare whatsoever. But what's interesting about that, we're not looking for any kind of self-congratulatory stuff out of that, but what I found interesting is that 90% of podcasts that start never get past 3 episodes, which I thought was interesting. And of those ones that get past, 90% of those don't make it past 20 episodes. Wow. And so the odds of a dumb podcast like ours making it to 100 episodes is about 6% of them. So I don't know. I don't know if that's stick-to-itiveness, Mike, or just us not being able to...
fortitude, maybe? I don't know.
Maybe we can't read the room and just get out of town.
We have nothing else to do. There's a lot of reasons, probably.
But a lot of just podcasts don't make it because they call it pod fade. They just kind of lose interest.
Pod fade.
Yeah. So speaking of losing interest, we talked about a phenomenon that we're a little disturbed about last season a few times, and it's about the state of film and its viability as a medium. And we've realized that for the last couple generations, it's kind of a generational thing that's kind of fallen off. Millennials, Gen Zs, and certainly have kind of not shown as much interest in film. You know, Mike, we did that list where, you know, the average millennial has only seen X amount of these top 50 films. And we were upset about that because we're passionate about film and we don't understand. There's several reasons, social or otherwise, why that may be happening. But we're here to announce, guys, that there is some hope. We have found a beacon. There is a light that's in the dark. We found some very interesting people that follow our show. And one of them is our good friend Kevin, the movie guy. And he's going to join us on this show. So welcome, Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey, thank you for having me, guys.
So Kevin is one of those guys that is keeping the scene alive. He may be the boy that puts the force back in order.
I'm trying.
Set balance to the force. But Kevin is a prolific contributor to Letterboxd. For those that are unaware, that is a social media platform for film. It's probably the predominant one on the interwebs right now. About 15 million users, but half of those are under 35 years old. So old farts like us might not be familiar. But if you're listening to our show, if you want a good perspective on what the modern take on film is, you might want to check this out. Kevin is on there, and that's how we kind of got to know him initially. And one thing I have to share with before we go one more word is, Kevin, I want to say you're up to 607 movies watched this year.
Yeah, I think I hit like 606, 607, something like that today. I don't remember the exact count, but yeah.
Yikes! So that's about 3 times as many movies as me and Mike watch in a year. So that's really impressive. So not only does Kevin watch these movies, for the lion's share of them, he actually writes reviews of them. And this guy can write; he's a writing machine. Several reviews this year. I've referenced him quite frequently. So Kevin, we do really appreciate your content on Letterboxd, and we're going to send out a link to Kevin's information at the end of the show so you can get to know him a little bit better. But we thought it would be interesting to get someone who's more of a scholar and more well-versed than us in the modern thing. But you know, it's interesting. It's not just new movies that you're watching, right, Kevin? It's
the way I pick movies is kind of random. I mean, I feel like I've kind of lived in a bubble for a lot of my life, watching the same movies that I love over and over and over again. And I've been trying to branch out. I mean, I did that a lot in college, but specifically like this year, I made a goal for myself to watch 500 movies and try to branch out and watch new stuff. Now, in that count, I counted things that I've seen before that I wanted to revisit, but the idea was to try to push myself and watch more movies, like different genres and things like that. So
let's talk about that a little bit. So the first question is like, what the hell? Second is like, how do you find the time? By my math, that's at least like that's binging like 5 movies a weekend. Is that how you're doing it? How do you find the time, or do you make time for it, or how do you manage all that?
Um, I'm able to watch a lot during the week. So after
Okay.
work, I definitely had some times where I was getting up before work, getting up early. So like 5:30, 6 o'clock, and watch something before 8. So I work from
Wow.
home most of the time. So
Yeah.
I have, I don't have that commute time in there. So I use that to watch movies or catch up on shows or whatever it is. So that's mainly how I've been getting most of my movies before work, after work, weekends. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I have to force myself to do it. Sit down. Sometimes I'm watching a movie even when I'm not necessarily in the mood to. But it's
That
about it's
sound
about keeping a review up every day, keeping the
yeah.
engagement up,
Yeah.
keeping people aware that there's good stuff out there besides, I mean, no
Yeah.
offense, Barbie and Oppenheimer. There's stuff that has yet to be discovered by people, by the mass.
That's a great point. Yeah, me and Mike have fallen into that trap in the 3 years we've been doing this show, that we've covered movies that we did not want to, categorically did not want to see.
Yeah,
But we felt, because of the pop culture relevance or the thematic elements that we want to convey in terms of nostalgia and going back and look at things and how they can change, we had to suffer through some tough ones. What kind of planted the seed with you with movies? Is that something that was like thrust upon you, or is that something you just naturally gravitated to? How did you get into the whole thing?
that's a good question. I started watching movies more with my girlfriend when we started dating, and
Yeah.
then that's what got me really into collecting. So we would always have something to watch, and then I kind of built my collection up over time. And then it was just about finding more movies to have on my shelf.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. A lot of your stuff
you
is
know,
Blu-ray watched, right? Not streamed or anything like that, or
yeah, a lot of the stuff I watch is Blu-rays. I try to watch stuff on physical media when I can. I'm not anti-stream or anything like that,
yeah.
but I like watching stuff on Blu-ray, 4K. So yeah, I've got a
Yeah.
pretty hefty collection to work through. So I'm usually not short of a movie. I can usually find something pretty quick.
That's great. No, well,
That's
again,
cool.
so it's for those reasons and a few others that we thought Kevin would be an interesting guest for the show, because he's obviously as passionate about these things as we are, but he's gone out of the box a little bit. And I think just this week he's reviewed movies from the 20s,
Yeah.
from every decade. So I mean, I think it's been covered. So we want to get his take on what he's watching now and what his formative movies were, and then kind of compare and contrast if there's a generational thing, because he's slightly younger than us. I'm saying that because I'm an old guy, but we could be your father. But we wanted a fresh perspective, and we've got some other guests that are millennials, and they bring their own take. So we thought with your proficiency in movie watching and your skill set, we would really welcome you to the show. So we're really glad to have you. So there you go.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here.
All right. So one of the movies that we talked to Kevin earlier about potentially watching was From Dusk Till Dawn, which will be the topic of this week's show. Mike, we had 6 vampire movies in October.
I know, right?
We just couldn't shake it. We got to go to the well one more
One
time
more
this
for the
year.
year's over.
But it was a consensus pick, and this one's certainly a lot of fun to talk about. So maybe we should just get started, because we got a lot to cover. So let's get going. So this was directed by Robert Rodriguez, famous independent filmmaker now. He started out very bare bones budget for a lot of his films. The first one, El Mariachi, he made on credit cards, I believe. He's gone on to do bigger studio things like Spy Kids and Predators and Machete, Mike, uh,
Oh yeah.
starring one of our favorite character actors of this film as well, Danny Trejo. His most recent exploits have been in the Disney Star Wars universe. He did a few episodes of the Book of Boba Fett. He is inspired at 12 years old by watching Escape from New York, which I hear they're doing a remake of, and I'm not quite sure how I feel about that, but there you go. He's a formal chef, and he's good buddies with Kevin Smith, and he actually wrote the screenplay for Predator 3, which I wish they would have made, because this involved Dutch and
Oh, Danny Glover getting
Danny
together.
Glover going back to the Predator's home planet as POWs. I thought that might have been a good premise to
Oh
flesh out,
wow. Yeah.
but
Huh.
yeah, it wasn't to be. It was written by Quentin Tarantino, who we all know, from his guest spot cameo on The Golden Girls, Mike, as an Elvis impersonator 100 years ago.
Yeah.
True story. Of course, he's penned Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, and you just go down the list. He's done 17 screenplays total, has 8 Oscar nominations, 2 wins. The original story was developed by a guy named Robert Kurtzman, who is a special effects artist to some fame. He wrote this short story and paid Tarantino $1,500 to write it. So this was his first script. So that's started from very humble beginnings.
Now he's in control of Star Trek.
There you go. Yeah, so this had a $19 million budget and it was released in the relatively soft part of the year as January 19th, 1996. So, Mike, this one's a run and gun movie, very complex, more of a family film. You know,
Very family,
if your
yeah.
family's last name is Manson, but it's got an interesting cast of characters. Mike, so why don't you walk us through the cast?
Oh, well, the cast begins and ends with two of my favorite actors, Selma Hayek. And she
You
sorry.
went there.
I went there. Sorry about
All right.
that. Yeah, you have Antonio Banderas lookalike George Clooney, who I think this was his first big role. You can correct me if possible. Uh, it was his, very quickly after his, fame from being in Facts of Life. And Quint, he plays, somewhat, I don't know, he's the anti-hero of the movie, and he's with his brother Quentin Tarantino, who are criminals on the run. Quentin Tarantino, who was appears to really like feet in this movie.
Yeah, that's a recurring theme in a lot of his movies, that fetish of
it
little,
is,
little creepy.
yeah. It kind of brings it to, like the real life form. It's like, wait, is this where is a fine line between the creepy Tarantino in the movie and the creepy
Yeah.
Tarantino in real life? But it's not a role that won't it won't surprise you. Along for the ride is a couple people they kidnap and use their RV. Harvey Keitel, who's a retired preacher, and Juliette Lewis. This is what our third movie involving
Yeah.
Juliette Lewis,
Yeah.
who she how many violent movies was she in the 90s? It's like, come on. You got a whole host of baddies at the Titty Twister bar that we can go through. Danny Trejo, as you mentioned, he's like Sean Bean. He
He
dies in
dies
most
all
of
the
it.
time.
Yeah, he dies all the time. Cheech Marin, in one of those rare cases where he plays three different people. He's a border guard. He's Chet, and then he's Carlos at the end. So
Yeah.
he really yeah, you could tell he really studied his roles. Tom Savini, horror master, is a sex machine and one of the bar patrons, along with Fred Williamson, the Hammer, a
Mhm.
star of black exploitation films in the 70s. Former Kansas City Chief. Who else was it? John Saxon, one of your
Yeah.
favorites, Justin. He
Yeah.
makes a. I thought he would end up later in the movie. He appears early on as like a ranger who's going to get those two brothers, but
Yeah.
he comes
I,
and goes.
I think his lone scene here has to be just fan service, right? Because
It had to
he's in
be.
all those 70s exploitation films. He's got to be there.
That's what I felt about Fred Williamson too. Is like he
Yeah.
would, who was actually in the original Inglourious Bastards, but that's another story.
Yeah.
And then Kelly Preston, just in a really odd role as like, too happy reporter reporting deaths. It was just, it was one of those blink and you'll miss it, along with John Hawkes, who's like this guy running a bar at the start, like a bar and bait shop, and
He's my favorite side character by far.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
this is
you notice him right away. Like he's the first thing you see in the movie. Like, oh yeah, that guy,
that guy. Yeah, he was in The Perfect Storm with George Clooney. So
Yeah.
there you go. And there's your cast. I'm done.
All right, well, that's enough. Thank you very much, Mike. I talked about George Clooney. This is one of his first earlier bigger roles. Very controversial for his haircut. I remember that was a problem with the short haircut and the soft bangs.
Like I said, I think he was supposed to like Banderas in a way.
Yeah, and then the neck tattoo set a lot of people off. That was way back when, before that was commonplace. This was originally offered to John Travolta, but he turned it down and did Pulp Fiction instead. But Clooney was paid $250,000 for this movie. So
Nice.
not a bad 3 weeks work, I suppose. This is a fun one. Some other notes about the making of the movie. Salma Hayek, you mentioned as your lead character there, Mike. She had a short role in this, of course, as a stripper, but she had a real fear of snakes. That was real, and she refused to be near them. And then, like when she read the script, she decided that she would actually go to therapy to overcome her phobia, so she could take the role. And then Rodriguez kind of tricked her, thinking that Madonna was ready to take the part. So she'd rather than have that happen, she decided to go to therapy and spent 2 months to overcome her fear. So took one for the team. Thank you, Salma. A lot of gore, a lot of violence. The MCA board had a lot of problem with this one. They got by a lot of that stuff by using green blood instead of red blood, and that kind of helped
Oh
loosen up
yeah,
the restrictions on it.
that was the Evil Dead like
The
get
Evil
around
Dead
too,
trick,
wasn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Purple blood, blue blood, whatever. Anything but red, I guess that matters, I suppose. But the violence here is almost pretty, nonsensical and almost comical, so I think it probably would have been okay. The establishment known as the Titty Twister here, guys, was that in the TV edit, it's renamed Kitty Twister. And
Oh
that's
yeah.
strange for two reasons. One, that they changed it, but the other one, how can there be a commercial TV edit for this?
I don't.
There's 122 kills, there's 105 F-bombs, and you don't need to
That's
see
an
a
art.
vampire.
It's an
Go
art
ahead.
form in itself. These guys that can,
Yeah.
literally twist a movie like that and turn it into something that's passable for the FCC. I don't know. I don't know how they do it.
I have a morbid fascination. I want to see the TV version to see what's left.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned Tom Savini, his role as Sex Machine here with his codpiece revolver. I thought that was a great. He's one of my
Yes.
favorite parts of the movie. He really has those whip skills. He would that wasn't a stuntman. He was actually throwing that whip around, which I thought was fun, and no stuntman was required for that. But this is a lot. This was a lot of fun. I remember the week this came out. There was a lot of pushback from some groups saying it was too violent, too misogynistic, and all that kind of stuff. But it was even for 1996. So some of the things going on in 1996 kind of give you a barometer of pop culture. And the movie scene the week before this came out, you had Biodome with Pauly Shore and several others.
Ugh.
One of our favorites. Uh, Dunstan checked in.
Mm.
I think Jason Alexander's in that
Yeah. Is that
with
a sea? Was it a sea lion or a seal?
it's an orangutan.
Oh,
That was a favorite of mine growing
Okay,
up.
fair
that was
enough.
a
On
orangutan.
VHS. I'm very familiar with
Okay,
Dunstan Check.
all right.
Oh
So, and
wow.
I think Mike, the sequel to one of your favorite movies, The Lawnmower Man 2, came out because there were so many unanswered questions from the first Lawnmower Man. This came out on the 19th, as I mentioned. It was a solo release, no competition on that Friday, and then it kind of bled into February next week, where we had Black Sheep, and then a couple weeks later, of course, Broken Arrow, which we covered on an earlier podcast, which is a great film. So we'll get into that. 1996 was a colossal year for movies. For the total box office there, Independence Day was the number one, of course, followed closely by Twister, Mission Impossible, and then The Rock. Mike was the fourth
Wow.
biggest movie
We've
there.
covered 96 pretty good.
We kind of covered that cradle to grave pretty much. Of course, The English Patient won Best Picture, a movie I still have not seen. Is that on your list, Kevin? Have you seen The English Patient yet?
I feel like I know about it, like in my periphery, but I feel like it's one of those movies that maybe hasn't aged well, or people aren't. I don't remember, but I thought I heard something not so positive about it that made me maybe like not
Yeah,
prioritize it.
it gets grouped into that lump of movies, the movies that won Oscars that probably shouldn't have won it. 20 years hindsight says, well, that was probably not the best picture that year. So
You mean you don't like the movie?
on the
Yeah.
music scene, we always feel compelled to talk about the music scene. So these would be classics to you, Kevin. One Sweet Day by Mariah Carey was a top song on the charts, along with Gangster's Paradise by Coolio.
Oh yeah.
Rest in peace, Coolio. And then you remind me of something by R. Kelly.
No, no.
Uh-oh.
We're talking about sexual predators. Why not bring up R. Kelly? Some other things going on in the pop culture scene. This was the first year they had dial-up AOL.
You've got mail.
Kevin, you never had to deal with that, unfortunate for you, but used to get a busy signal when you try to get online. And if your mom used the phone,
We were like the last people in my family to get
okay,
high speed, so yep, I remember it.
yep,
Fortunately,
cool. This is the year they had the Atlanta Summer Olympics, featuring a bunch of red pickup trucks going around Olympic Coliseum. Mike, that had never been seen in an Olympic spectrum before. We were all in love with Carrie Strug, right?
Oh no. I forgot about
Jim
it.
just
Carry it
Carrie
away.
Carrie
Yeah.
Strug, yeah. This is the year they had the final episode of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Spoiler: everybody gets killed. They all die at the end. So,
Oh, it's like that show Dinosaurs, is it a meteor?
it's a joke. This is the year that MTV2 launched, Mike. So now we can get even more Teen Mom and Jersey Shore. So MTV was originally launched to play music as a response to MTV going pretty much to reality programming. And then about 4 months later, MTV2 was just playing repeats of all the reality programs in the first place. So no good there either. So no MTV sucks twice as much. And then this is the first year we had Tickle Me Elmo on the store shelves, guys. So it's still there, still creeping people out. All right. So speaking of creeping people out, let's get into a quick summary of this movie. We'll talk about some the bigger highlights here and why it was such an outstanding romp. So okay, Ramblers, let's get rambling. Mike, why don't you hit the button for me? So our movie kind of starts innocently enough with a couple guys having a conversation in a liquor store. uh, the attendant and sheriff's deputy. He goes in to drain the lizard, Mike. I like that
Yes,
terminology. Yeah,
classic.
drain the lizard. And as he slowly heads to the bathroom, the camera pans over and we see that this is, in fact, a holdup. And you've got George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino playing Seth and Ricky, respectively, as the marauders here. They've got two teenage girls as hostages being held at gunpoint, and it's a bit of a standoff. And we get introduced to Richie's kind of odd personality. He's kind of like Lenny in All the Mice and Men here. He's just a little off the spectrum, slightly weird. He's a little paranoid, and that paranoia leads to a shootout that results in most of the people getting killed. Of course, there's the Rodriguez staple shot with the people, walking away from an explosion in the background, undeterred. So they speed off in their car, and there's a neat shot here, Kevin. I thought was funny where the camera kind of zooms in on the trunk, and you see this poor woman superimposed, like it's see through the in the panel. You see her as a hostage in the trunk. So that first scene, you really kind of know what you're in for.
It's one of those strange Tarantino editing choices. You see him pop up in his movies, and you're kind of like, okay, I haven't seen a movie. I'm sure movies have done that before, and this is some kind of homage. But yeah, that was definitely a Tarantino
That is a
directorial
total
choice.
70s grinder thing, just
Yeah.
fantastic. So they're trying to get to Mexico, and they've got this hostage to help them get there. So we cut to the next part of the story where we see a small family comprised of Harvey Keitel playing Jacob, who and his, I guess, surrogate family, which is Eli, his son, and show favorite Juliette Lewis as his daughter. They're sitting having breakfast at the diner, and he's lost his faith as a pastor, and he's from a recent event. He lost his wife, and kind of established his dilemma there. And they're kind of traveling across the country, and they're in Winnebago, and he wants to spend one more night in the bed. So they decide they're going to find the closest motel, and it turns out to be a pretty bad decision. And we'll get there why that is in a minute. The next scene is an interesting one. It's a little more exposition, done very cleverly through Kelly Preston's infotainment and news reporting
Ugh.
style, where she overly enthusiastically kind of explains what the deal is with Tarantino and Clooney about their violent crime spree. They actually had to go far as to have a scoreboard
I know.
of all the death and the
Yeah.
carnage on the screen. And that ends with her having an interesting little conversation with John Saxon as a
Yeah.
sheriff tasked to track him down.
She can tell you about a plane crash for a gleam in her eye.
She's more than happy to talk about all that carnage. I like at the end,
Mm.
she talks to Saxon. Are you trying to get him? He says, yeah. And that was about it. He said like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll get him. And then that was it.
There goes.
We never
No,
saw
no,
either one of those guys again.
no more Saxon.
But there's no time because the movie's just moving at a breakneck speed already. So back at the motel, Richie and Seth, they're getting set up. Clooney takes off to run an errand, leaving Richie in the room alone with their hostage. And we're not going to get into the details there, but it doesn't go well. And they end up, she doesn't make it. Let's just call it that. So now they don't have a hostage to help them get to Mexico. So they go to the room next door and they find Harvey Keitel and his clan, and they're kidnapped and they take over the RV and they're headed to Mexico. And guys, we got ourselves a movie. So.
Road trip.
Yep. So after a contentious stand at the border, by the first of three Cheech Marin appearances as a border agent here, they go through the border and make their way to the rendezvous point to get their cash for the loot that the crime spree they've completed, and they pull up to the Titty Twister, like the
Yeah.
bar in the middle of the desert that caters to truckers and bikers, pretty much primarily. So as they make their way with their newly found unwilling hostages in tow, they get up to the door, and then we see Jake Marin as his in his second role as the, let's say, MC, maybe the doorman of the establishment.
The Carney. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's horrible, but it's one of the funniest things I've heard in a long time. His little monologue he says about showcasing the let's say the different types of felines that are available in the
That's the way to put it.
in the bar. You've got, red ones and hairy ones and Naugahyde felines,
Mhm.
Naugahyde. But he does his little spiel, and then as Clooney comes in, he punches him in the nose, knocks him out, and makes his way into the bar. And that's where after about an hour or so, the action really gets started, actually, because it switches from a crime spree movie over to a different one, more full-on gore horror. They're sitting there having their drinks, waiting for dawn when so they're going to spend the night in this bar. And when they all agree that when their contacts show up with the cash, they'll let Harvey Keitel and his kids go. Um, Cheech Marin, upset the fact that he got beat up, comes in and with his buddies until including Danny Trejo, famous Mexican character actor, and they start a fight, and there's some violence there. And at this point, Salma Hayek comes out and does her little dance. I forget her name, but
Satanomic,
Satanica,
pandemonic,
Pandemonia,
pandemonic, yeah,
Satanica
pandemonium.
Pandemonia.
Yeah.
But there's the ruse there, Mike, is that she's actually a vampire.
Dun, dun,
So in
dun.
the middle of this violence, when she sees all this blood, that triggers the vampire response. And the next thing you know, we find out the entire establishment is composed of vampires.
What?
And then you get about, I don't know, probably 15, 20 minutes of just blood and gratuitous nudity and hyper gore. Just all hell breaks loose.
Felines turn into bats.
That's very good. Yes, you're really just at the mercy of what they're going to show you because the visuals just kind of take over. There's some very interesting kills here. I like the torso guitar that the band was playing. That was a nice little touch. But this kind of culminates with Quentin Tarantino gets killed by one of the vampires. We lose him. They managed to kill most of the main vampires in the establishment, but now they've got more vampires on the outside trying to get in, and they forget the fact that everybody that they killed inside has now turned into a vampire. So it's the second act is just them trying to figure out a way. The beginning of the third act is them trying to figure out a way to survive the situation. They go down into the basement and they find a stash of all the collective stash of all the truckers' booty that they stole over the years. And they start. There's an amazing scene here, Kevin. I love it where it's like the psych up scene where they're preparing for battle and they've got a different, I like the jackhammer steak, and then they made condom balloons out of holy water. That was nice. Grenades.
Yep.
And the super soaker.
Super soaker was great.
That was a great touch. But the last one's kind of like your final like 300 style showdown where they make their way to the front of the doors to freedom, and then of course they're saved by daylight, and everybody's dead. We lose Harvey Keitel here; he gets bit. We lose his son, and it's just George and Clooney are the ones that are left. They meet the third iteration of Cheech Marin, who provides them with the cash they've been waiting for, and they decide to go their separate ways. But by this point, Juliette Lewis is kind of gone from a very innocent person at the very beginning of the story to wanting to be part of his gang, but he won't allow it. And then they kind of split up and go their own ways. And as the camera pulls back for our grand ending, we see that the entire bar is actually the top of a giant Aztec temple, which I think is a matte painting, but it's still yeah. So I mean that summary did it no justice whatsoever, guys. But that was just kind of it was an interesting take on a movie like this because there was no tacked on plot. It wasn't complex. It was what it was, right, Kevin? It was just one of those things where they weren't trying to do much more than what they told you they were trying to do.
It's the perfect late night movie.
That's exactly. It's totally right. That's like a midnight movie that you watch with your guy friends, and it's just one of those things that's just very accessible and very friendly. So.
Oh yeah.
All right, so that was it in a nutshell. So we'll talk about awards and accolades real quick, and then we'll talk about our take on the film. So this had a $10 million opening, so not too bad given its limited release. It ended up doing $26 million domestically. Did not have a worldwide audience except for a small release in Australia and New Zealand, where it picked up $2,400 more. It gave birth to two sequels. I think most of those were direct to video. One was a Texas Blood Money from 1999.
Yes,
like $6,000.
That was a Sci-Fi Channel staple for a few years.
Yeah, and I think before that was Hangman's Daughter, somewhere around there. They had up
2000. Yeah, that was the third one. Yeah, we went
Yeah.
back 100 years or something like that.
Yeah, that got a little bit more at the box office, but the quality of the actors kind of diminished with each one. It had a brief run on the El Rey network, which is no longer a thing. That was Rodriguez had started a cable channel. 2014, they had the 31 episode run of that to some success. I think it got moved to Netflix at some point, but I tried finding it, and it's no longer there. But 31 episodes of that. It did not get any Oscars. Shocker, guys. It
Wow.
won 2 Chainsaws, which is the awards for Fangoria, celebrating outstanding achievement in horror films. Um, the MTV Awards, Kevin, a running
Uh-oh.
joke for us is we always like to make fun of MTV, especially how unrelatable they are to movies. And they gave an award to George Clooney as the winner for the breakthrough performance, he beat Chris Tucker. But that was the only recognition this movie had. Short of it won a Stinker Bad Movies Award and a Razzie Award, both for
Wow.
Tarantino for Worst Supporting Actor, but he lost in both cases to uh, Marlon Brando in The Island of Dr. Moreau. So, Kevin, not to be a broken record, has The Island of Dr. Moreau come across your screen yet?
No, it hasn't.
Oh.
All right, well,
Oh. So
you're
it's one
going
of
to
those
give
it's
us.
one of those movies where it's like really it's so bad, but the story behind how they made it is almost better than the movie.
I
But
would
yeah,
recommend watching the movie
you got to
first,
see it.
but there's a documentary about how it was made, which is 10 times better. But yeah, it's I wouldn't put it at the top of your list, but to give you some perspective, that might be one you want to put in the pile.
Okay.
I wouldn't review that for people.
Everything gets reviewed.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay,
All
enjoy
right.
then.
All right, so this is the part of the show where we kind of talk about the film we just saw, and we generally look at it from the first viewpoint of our as younger moviegoers, and then we kind of look at it again as grumpy old jerks to see if our perceptions have changed. Kevin, I'm guessing you're probably 4 or 5 years old when this first came out the first time. So if you want to just kind of give your take on the movie in general, or if you did a rewatch and if you saw anything new, if you want to kind of talk about your take on the movie and what your thoughts were.
Yeah. I was 4 when this came out, so I didn't see this in theaters.
Fair enough. Good parents.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if I remember my first viewing, but I remember how I felt when I watched it for the first time.
Yeah.
And I've probably seen this movie 8 to 10 times
Okay.
since I first saw it, so I'm really familiar with it. I was gonna rewatch it to prepare for this, but I actually just watched it in April and reviewed it, and I mean I know it pretty well, so I felt pretty prepared to talk about it. But yeah, I just don't remember my first experience. I just remember just how thrilled I was the first time I watched it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned about, the rewatch, and that there's an interesting thing that we've found from doing the podcast is we watched a lot of these movies, dozens of times, but we found that like when you sit down and do like a diagnostic watch, for lack of a better phrase,
Yeah,
you kind of retrain your eye to go out of your body and look at it from that critical view. And sometimes that's ruined movies for us, to be honest with you. But it's one of the things we've kind of fleshed out during the course of the show that we didn't expect to have this phenomenon that, we had that, hey, when you look at these movies from a diagnostic thing and not just a purely, casual enjoyment thing, some things come up if you're looking for them. So that search image kind of presents itself. So Mike, why don't you kind of alliterate that point a little bit more? Let's talk about your first view and then your take on it the second time through.
Yeah, I hadn't seen this movie since I didn't see it in the theater, but it was like soon afterwards, probably like on a VHS or something. But
Yeah.
I remember liking it a lot, and but the one scene I remember was the Selma Hayek, letting the liquor go down her foot, and Quentin Tarantino sucking her toes. It was
You
so
you can't unsee that.
you can't see that. But my first watch, I really liked it. But yeah, the second watch was more, I think once I started, I think Kevin touched on it earlier, but like you watch the first few minutes of it and you're like, okay, this has a feel of like Grindhouse 70s movie. And after that, I kind of lost not interest in it, but it was like it just seemed really silly to me,
Yeah.
which I guess that
It is silly.
this is what you want to see it at at night with your boys.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I can't analyze a movie that it's just balls to the walls, just chaos. It's a great action movie, and the one thing that separates from being a '70s kind of one of those late night horror flicks is the great prosthetics and the great makeup that's done. And,
Yeah.
some of the
yeah,
some of the kills and some of the actual makeup they use to turn the like when Selma Hayek first turns into the vampire, like she looks like a lizard and then turns into like the
Yeah.
It's just really well done, and that's to me that's what you feel like you're that's what you're here for. You're watching how Danny Trejo turns into like this rig monster guy, and then just turns into like a puff of smoke on top of a pool table.
Yeah. I
It's
like
just
how Fred Williamson kind of turned into that big
yeah. I don't even
thick neck thing.
I can't even describe his face,
It
but
kind of
like
looks like
even
Von Banana Splits or something.
like the headless sex machine turns into like some kind of weird big rat.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
such
that
a
was
weird creature. Like I said, you get more, you almost laugh at it, but you kind of just enjoy the work that went
yeah.
into it in a way. But it's like I say, for me, it was the whole background of like, it was kind of repellent to me having, I love seeing Quentin Tarantino's character set,
Uh,
um, die in the movie because it was just like, yes, finally, this guy's a creep.
you're rooting
This,
for his death, were you?
oh yeah, I was just like, thank you, bite that asshole. Excuse my language, but yeah, you know what I mean. It's
Yeah.
just, but
That's
overall, it was fun fluff. Like I
yeah.
said, you said we kind of look at this with an analytic eye, but this was one of those movies. Like I said, I turned
I,
it off 10 minutes into it, and I was like, no, I can't do it. I'm just going to enjoy it. Not even writing notes for it. I was just like, I'm just going to enjoy it.
the opening scene where Tarantino gets his hand shot through, it's like, okay, all bets are off.
Yeah,
There's
the
no
opening
this isn't
it,
art. This is just fun, right?
the
So
opening scene was pure Tarantino.
yeah,
Just these two guys talking about a conversation, and you're like, where's this
yeah.
going? And then all of a sudden, oh, here we go.
There we go. Yeah.
Oh, guy on fire. Okay, let's
All
go.
right.
We
Yeah.
know what we're in for now. But
All right.
anyway, that
All right.
I didn't quite love it as much as I did, almost 30 years ago, but I still liked it.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Well,
I'm
that's a good take. So I remember the first time I saw this, I was wound up because I had just been introduced to like Tarantino not too many years earlier. It's like, I got to see Reservoir Dogs, and that was my first exposure to like, nonlinear storytelling and this unique thing. And it's really like what he was doing. And then, I'd seen Mariachi because I knew those guys were in camp with each other. And I just really appreciated that dirty, grindy stuff, that 70s inspired, stuff. And this was like a blend of like those grinder movies with Hammer movies, so it was a perfect little combination of these like
Mhm.
classic horror action motifs kind of blended together. And it was the kind of movie you would make if you were a 16-year-old kid. And that's usually, so I was still in
Mhm.
that mindset when I saw this, like, oh, this is a perfect movie. So I really liked it, but I still think at that age, I was a little bit underappreciated because I just didn't understand how difficult it is to make it this type of movie, certainly in the constraints of current Hollywood at that time. So, and I watched it, I watched it Saturday, and again, I watched this on Tubi, and I don't ever do that. I usually generally buy the movies so I can watch them uninterrupted. But this is like 8 minutes of content followed by like 6 minutes of commercials, and I realized immediately it was a bad thing. I should have done it. It just took me out of the film a little bit. So I made it a point to like get away and not watch the commercials. And then when it came back, I would run back and stop doing my chores
Do
and
they
watch the movie.
do they call it Kitty Twister on Tubi?
No, that they're unedited.
Oh,
That
cool.
was the one thing. But
Okay.
But I realize, as someone who's had experience trying to write screenplays, things like that, you spend so much time trying to establish a theme and a tone and a momentum of a film, and to see them like get chopped up from commercial release or on television, it's got to drive those guys crazy because those scenes are meant to be. Those are 100 minutes that are supposed to be blended seamlessly together, not interrupted. And just a callback, I'm concerned that given the way the current Hollywood climate is, I'm concerned that at some point, major motion pictures and theaters might start considering running ads during the films. I can see it going that way. I hope it doesn't. They certainly run enough before them, but it just seems like I don't know how they're going to survive if they don't take some sort of cost saving model like that. But it just kind of takes you out of the movie. But anyway, I watched it, intermittently, and I got to see the whole thing as a whole, and I realized that this is a genre. It created its own little genre here, and it just came fully appreciated, fully realized right in front of my eyes. And I just had such a good time watching it. Uh, Kevin, we're really glad you picked this one because we needed something like this because the other vampires movies we watched were a little melodramatic, little heavy-handed, but this one was just, balls out fun. And
Yeah, I mean that's what I love about it because
yeah,
I mean to be honest, vampire movies aren't really my favorite either, but it's the direction it goes in. And I mean,
yeah,
I'll tell you what really sold me on it the first time I watched it was it's two movies in one. So like you
yeah,
mentioned it at the top, it's a crime spree movie in the first half, and then I don't know exactly what point, 40, 50-minute mark, maybe,
Yeah.
it flips and it's a vampire gore fest, basically.
Yeah.
So I'm sold on the first movie, on movie one.
Yeah,
And
keep
I'm
going.
thinking, yeah, I'm thinking the whole movie is going to be movie one, but then it turns into movie two. And I mean, the first time I thought, I wasn't expecting it. It totally worked for me. So
Yeah, yeah, because I remember the trailers being pretty cryptic about it. They didn't really tell you a whole lot. You could tell from the title it had something to do, but
Yeah.
they didn't give away the store with the trailer. So you kind of went in kind of not knowing what to expect, and they certainly did deliver. And you got to respect the film; they can do that. So respecting film is an interesting way to segue into that. So we talked about the current state of Hollywood, and we feel that we're certainly not qualified to talk about modern movies because we don't see a lot of them because we kind of pigeonhole ourselves in this, podcast and the scope of this genre. So we decided that it might be a good experiment, Mike, or a social experiment, in fact, just to get someone else that's a little more exposed to it and kind of show us the way, lead us out of our little cave and get reintroduced to the, you know,
Modern world.
Hollywood needs our help, and we need to like start embracing some new films. So we thought it'd be interesting, given Kevin's aptitude, to let him kind of join us for this one. So instead of just doing our typical spiel, we decided this our weekly installment of "You Just Made the List, Pal." We're going to talk about our the year in film. This will debut the last week of the year, so this is kind of a year-end episode anyway. So it might be a good opportunity to kind of capture the year that was in film. But we're not good enough to just let it sit that. And me and Mike are too chatty, and our egos won't let us stop talking. So, as an interesting contrast, Mike and I will kind of counter with our favorite movies from our generation. So Kevin will talk about his five favorite movies from 2024. I will counter with my five favorite movies from 1994. And Mike, since you're like 4 months
I'm old.
older, you're going to
Yeah.
take your five favorite movies from 1984, and we're going to compare and contrast to see if these movies we see trends or there similarities between the two, and see what kind of conversation sprouts from that. So, Kevin, why don't you start us off? Let's talk about your number five pick for 2024.
sure. And I just want to preface real quick. I've seen my top five. I've seen all of these twice, so I feel like
Okay,
I have a good handle on them. But the ranking might change.
that's
And then
fair.
also, I haven't seen everything that came out. So this is more of like a favorites list until I feel like I've really
Yeah.
gotten a good grasp of the year. But so far, my number five, I'm going Furiosa Mad Max Saga.
Okay, cool. I have seen this one.
I know there's some mixed
Yeah.
opinions about it, and I didn't think I'd ever have to champion this movie, but
Yeah.
seeing how it performed, it's for what I got when I went in to see it. I was happy. I wasn't expecting Fury Road 2, but what I got was different, and I was into it. Yeah, I really liked it.
All right, that's a great pick.
Hmm.
Me and Mike had a running bet. We were going to try to see how many movies we've actually seen from your list. So I'm feeling good about this one already.
Good, good.
All right, all right. So that's a great pick. So my first pick from my fifth favorite movie from 1994 was a small little movie called Quiz Show. It was starring Ray Fiennes and the true story of the first kind of scandal on television. He is directed by Robert Redford. Just my second date movie with my now wife, so I think that's why it kind of stands out as well. But it's just a great period piece, a great movie, and it was a scandal on a quiz show. The answers were rigged, so Ray Fiennes was the waspy type guy that was winning all the they were giving him the answers, but it really betrayed the public's trust of television. It was the first instance of that really happening. You know, Now the public's trust gets, betrayed on a daily basis, and every reality show does that. But at the time, it was a really big deal. And it was just a neat little slice of life, just showing the impact that had on American culture, and that, people in the 50s couldn't trust their television, which is this new medium that everybody just fell in love with and embraced. But it really kind of painted a dark picture of, or portents of things to come, which I thought just really captured well. So that's my fifth pick of 1994 quiz show. All right, Mike, you're going to go back a decade longer,
Yeah, 10 more years. Keep going.
and let's talk about your first pick.
First of all, I want to talk about an anomaly from 1984, and that's that Breaking and Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo both came out in the same year. Isn't that crazy?
I did not know that.
There you go.
Wow.
That's your little nugget for the night. My fifth one is a movie called Romancing the Stone, which I
Ah,
still can't believe we haven't done this movie. It is a great action movie. It has Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner who get involved, or she gets involved because of her, dead husband, but they have to go to South America and try to find this emerald that's down there. And along the way, they, butt heads with Danny DeVito, who's kind of the comic villain in the movie. And
Great.
there's just some great scenes in the jungle, and just, it's just one of those just, it's almost kind of a slapstick comedy slash adventure movie. And, it's entertaining as hell. And
Yeah.
like I said, it's one of those we'll have to do eventually. And, to believe it came from 40 years ago now is just shocking to me. But
Yikes.
yeah,
Yeah.
one of my favorite action movies.
All right, great pick. All right, we're back around to you, Kevin. Let's go to the current day and let's talk about your number 4 pick for 2024.
All right, my number 4 pick. This is a movie I first heard about on Twitter. I heard a lot of buzz about it. Hadn't heard anything up until I started seeing stuff on social media about it. It was described as a cross between a Quentin Tarantino movie and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So I was sold on this one, and that movie is called Strange Darling.
Nice. I watched that last weekend.
Did you enjoy it?
I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. Just fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not breaking any new ground, and I hesitate to say there's a twist because that's sort of a spoiler, but it might be a little bit predictable, but it was so stylish, and style goes a long way with me. A lot of people say style over substance is bad, but I mean, if the style's good enough,
It trumps it. Yeah. Yeah. Just another example of that, like non-traditional, non-linear storytelling that's just, it's very hard to pull off, but when you do it right, you think it couldn't possibly work, but again, I couldn't agree more. That's a great pick. All right, so my next pick for 1994 is a movie called Speed, which we covered on our 9th show, Mike, and no one listened to it. So it's one of our least rated
That's a
episodes.
weird one. It has Keanu Reeves, guys. Come on.
Yeah, so it's again, this is where kind of Americans kind of fell in love with Keanu. Of course, you had Gary Busey. He was crazy then. It was before he went like really crazy. But just Jan de Bont directed it, and it's a very simple premise movie, kind of like the ones we just reviewed today. There's not more much about it. It's you got the bus goes below 55 miles an hour and explodes, kind of a terrorist thing, but just loaded with action from start to finish. There's not a useless scene there. Just a very tight, taut action thriller with some great stunts and great performances that people don't really talk about a whole lot when they think about the bus, but the panic from Sandra Bullock and then Keanu's cool reserve and Jeff Daniels as the seasoned cop behind it. And of course you got, Hopper going off the rails again as an evil villain.
Oh yeah.
Just had all the elements of the classic 90s big budget Hollywood film and just a sweet spot for us. So that's my number 4 pick, Speed. So Mike, we're back in the mothballs again. Let's go to 1984. What's your 4th pick?
You gotta love a villain that loves college football. Another factoid from 1984. 2 Mystery Science Theater movies came out that year: Devilfish and Final Justice.
Final Justice, Joe Don Baker.
That's right. My 4th pick is This Is Spinal Tap, which is I think for me probably one of the first instances. I know like Woody Allen kind of experiment with Zelig, which was kind of a similar like a mockumentary.
Yeah.
But the way Rob Reiner directed this, movie about a band that was, a fictional heavy metal band that goes through these just their lowest point in their career and just follows them on their tour is fabulous. It's where you get the famous quote about it, turning it up to 11.
If you can see, the numbers all go to 11. Look, right across the board. 11, 11,
and most of
11,
the
and then
amps go up to 10.
Exactly.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's so many just great little lines in this movie. I don't even know where to start. I've seen it 20 times now. After I've thought about this list, I was like, I want to see that one again, But yeah, so great movie. This is Spinal Tap. I recommend anybody who has seen like a Christopher Guest mockumentary that came years later. This was kind of like the origin story of those, and it was so well done. So this is Spinal Tap.
We've got armadillos in our trousers. I mean, it's really quite frightening.
Great. I didn't realize that was 84. Great pick, Mike.
Yeah.
All right, we're back around to current day. So Kevin, let's do your next pick, number 3.
All right, my number 3 pick is a little movie called Love Lies Bleeding.
Oh, okay.
Rose Glass directed. She directed Saint Maud, which I thought was solid, but not like a favorite. But Love Lies Bleeding kind of blew me away. Reminded me a lot of one of my favorite movies, Mulholland Drive, because you're kind
Mm.
of following two women that are like in a relationship, and then it goes sour, and kind of goes in some crazy directions. So it was a big surprise for me. I wasn't expecting it to like it nearly as much as I did. Um, Kristen Stewart's great. I cannot remember the name of the other woman, but they were fantastic together. Takes kind of a surreal turn at the end, but I mean, my that won't work for everyone. But
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. Yeah,
I think that's Katie O'Brien you're talking about
yeah,
there.
yeah.
And
Katie O'Brien, that's right.
it's got Ed Harris in it, Mike, so you might want to watch it.
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
All
he's
right.
he's really creepy in it. He
Yeah.
he plays a great character.
He's
Does it
look
have
at
anything? Does it have anything to do with Elton John?
no.
Okay, just curious.
Mike's got a weird perspective. You just have to forgive him, Kevin. All right. All right. So my next pick for 1994 is sentimental pick, and it's sappy. I'm going to catch some grief for it, but I'm going to go in anyway. I'm going to go with Forrest Gump. Only because I just recently watched this. I didn't like Forrest Gump for a very long time. This is my wife and I's our first date was to see Forrest Gump. And I guess I had that attachment to it. But I always thought it was kind of like sappy Hollywood stuff, especially compared to other films, that like Pulp Fiction that were out around that type of year, because it won a lot of awards that I thought Pulp Fiction should have won. But I watched it again, a few weeks ago, on the big screen in my house, my little theater, and me and my wife watched it again. It's kind of like a nostalgic trip down for our first date. And maybe that helps something to do with my take on it. But it was one of those things where it struck a chord with me for some reason, other than just the sentimental portion of it. It really is the classic American story. Hank's, the titular character here is great, but the story is really told by everybody about him, because they're the people that actually go through the trials and tribulations, especially, Robin Wright. Jenny lives the tough life. She goes through all the trials and tribulations, and Forrest just kind of goes through it with that. But she's the one that really lives in that era, for better or for worse. But it's just a overly sentimental. I'll concede that, but it was just one of those movies that just, it captures the American experience, probably the Boomer generation more than any of us. But it was one of those things that it's just very well made, and it's one of those things I just, like it or not, it's one of those things it's a classic American film, and you just got to, had to be in the top five. So that's my third pick, Forrest Gump. All right, Mike, back to the 80s.
Hey man, did you know that in 1984, the movie Rhinestone with a singing Sylvester Stallone came out?
Budweiser, you created a monster, and they call him freaking Stein.
I did. I
There
did
you
know
go.
that.
All right. Pick number three. I've got to go with a movie I've mentioned before on this podcast. It's Starman. It's kind of a alien falling to Earth kind of story, but it doesn't really lean into the like special effects science fiction-y part of it as much as just kind of a almost like a alien almost being human story where he touches people's lives. It has, Jeff Bridges is the alien that falls down in Karen Allen's backyard, and it's another kind of a road trippy kind of thing where they're getting chased by the government and he's trying to find this location in Arizona or New Mexico. I can't remember, one of those two.
Yeah.
And it ends with him being able to go back to his home planet. But there's a lot of like just moments in the movie that involve is he an alien or is he human? And even though he takes her dead husband's form, she knows he's an alien. But it's like I said, it's one of those it's a science fiction movie that's not big on the special effects, but it's really
Yeah.
good on the kind of the human side of it. And it's a movie I enjoyed from back then, Starman.
You sure you weren't thinking E.T., Mike?
No, it
All
wasn't
right.
E.T.
Just
I know
checking.
it's
Just
a
checking.
it's a slight ripoff. I get it, but he's actually a human in the movie,
All
so
right. Okay.
he's
Well,
not eating Reese's Pieces.
just checking on you, Mike. Sometimes you get confused. That's all. All right. So, Ken, we're back around to you. Your second pick for 2024.
All right, my number two pick is I believe this is technically a 2023 movie, but it didn't get a release in the U.S. at least widely or available for most people to see until this year, so I'm
Yeah.
counting it for this year. And that is a movie called The Last Stop in Yuma County. Um, I can't remember the last name of the director. It's Francis something. It's an Italian last name. I'm beating myself up for not being prepared with this, but it's basically an homage to 70s contained thrillers. These bank robbers kind of have to stop at this gas station because the gas station there's no fuel left, and they have to wait for the next gas truck to come along. So they're stuck at this gas station, and the tension just gets tighter and tighter until it finally snaps, and things just blow up. And I thought it was perfect. Could have worked as a stage play, honestly. Really good movie.
That's Francis Galuppi, I think is your.
Galuppy, that's
Yeah.
what it was. Yeah,
Sounds like Maximum Overdrive.
Yeah. No, Mike.
it was really good. I mean, 90 minutes. It doesn't do anything that you probably haven't seen in another movie before, but the way it does it is just so good. And it's one of those movies you get done, you're like, well, I can't really say they don't make them like they used to because they just made one, right here.
Yeah.
But it's not one that got a lot of attention or anything like that. I just blind bought it on Blu-ray because Jim Cummings is involved.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work, but I'm a huge fan of him. I think he's a great director, great actor, great writer.
It did because I know Sierra McCormick's in that, and it's from The Vast of Night. Did he do The Vast of Night too? Is that him? Is that the same guy?
No, I don't think he
No.
did that.
Okay. All right. Guess so. All right. That's a great pick. That's one we'll have to put on the list there, Mike.
Yeah.
So far, that's the first one I got stumped on. So, all right. So my second pick is for 1994 at least is going to be the Pulp Fiction. Of course, we talked about that. I don't know how I could not put that on there. This was essentially just for all the reasons we liked, From Dusk Till Dawn. Pulp Fiction was, I haven't seen it in a while, and I'm really anxious to see it again. I suppose we'll cover it on the podcast, Mike, but it'll probably be a two-parter because there's just so much going on. You've got, again, another example of, nonlinear storytelling. The plots overlap each other. You've got small little vignettes that kind of overlap, and just the way the dialogue you had never heard before.
Check out the big brain on bread.
It's just some of the situation it gave Hollywood faith in John Travolta again, Mike. So we got to see all those new Travolta movies because of this.
Right.
So we got that to thankfully for. But it's just one of those things that it was just so far ahead of its time for 94 for Hollywood. They had not seen anything like that in a very long time. It was worth all the buzz. It's just great performances top to bottom. Just to edit that thing down and to direct those three stories that interweave like that so perfectly, and just a fantastic film. Enough probably been said about it already. So that's my second one, Pulp Fiction. So, Mike, I'm guessing you have something more about 1984, right?
Yeah, it brought us one of the best podcasts we've ever done, which was Dune.
Yeah,
How can we forget that cast of characters, huh?
yeah.
But it also a couple other podcasts we did was Ghostbusters and Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984.
We get that. Yeah.
There you go. So we've already done 3 of them. A lot more to go, including this next one, which it's kind of a controversial pick. But my number 2 pick is 2010, the year we make contact.
Really?
It was the unnecessary sequel to 2001, which I must have watched 2010 probably, I don't know, a dozen times on HBO right after it came out on TV, and I liked it. To me, 2001 is pretentious. I know how much you love pretentious stuff, Justin.
Big fan.
But there's a lot of ambiguity to it. I don't care what you say. It is great art. You respect Kubrick's work,
Mm-hmm.
but there needed to be something that kind of explained a little bit, what Arthur C. Clarke was saying, and it's almost in a way it's probably too straightforward, especially the end of 2010.
Yeah.
But at least it gave you some answers, and it's a well acted movie. It has Helen Mirren in it, and Roy Scheider, Bob Balaban, and even John Lithgow, and they actually use real Russian. Well, except for Helen Mirren, they use real Russians in the movie too. But I liked it, and like I said, I think it at the time it was we reviewed a couple movies ourselves in this podcast that were not necessary sequels. When this one probably wasn't, but it's so well done, and for for a dumbed down generation that wasn't into like, acid and smoking pot when they went in the theater. See 2001.
There he is. There it
This this
is.
was this was a good movie. So there you go.
That's a great pick, Mike. I didn't expect that one, so very unique. Well done. All right, so we're back to the big guns here, guys. So we're gonna hit our number ones here. So Kevin, let's hear your best pick for 24
All right, my
so
favorite
far.
movie of the year so far. I don't think it'll be dethroned,
Yeah.
but as of now, my favorite movie is The Substance.
Oh
Oh wow.
yeah, I did
Ah,
see that one.
you did see
Yeah,
that
I,
one.
Yeah.
I I'm real picky about giving out 5-star ratings for stuff that I
I haven't
watch.
seen any on your page. It's paid 4.5. That's the tops I've seen. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
gave it a 4.5 initially, and then I had to marinate with it a little bit, and then I decided, you know what, this is a masterpiece. I mean, you got
Really?
Margaret. Yeah, that's what I think. I mean, you got Margaret Qualley and Demi Moore, and they're both just giving 110% to this movie. I mean, you can tell it's kind of a personal project for both of them. They're both putting themselves in uncomfortable situations. I mean, if you see it, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You got the body horror stuff that, I mean,
Mike's
behind
out.
the scenes stuff has come out with that
Yeah,
now. It just
no,
looks
I watched it. It
miserable.
was it was a
Oh
tough
yeah.
watch, but yeah, it was the body
Mike
horror
Mike's got
is
a notorious
it's
he hates
body horror
body
is an
horror.
understatement in this
Yeah.
movie, man.
Really?
God.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
I'm intrigued.
And it has one of your favorite actors, Justin, Dennis Quaid.
Really?
Yeah,
All
for
right.
a little role. Yeah.
I'll give it a whirl. Kevin, to your point, I just the buzz around it is enough to make me want to see it, and I think it's actually accessible on pay-per-view now already. But
Mhm.
it just the subject matter, and just I like the fact that I don't know exactly what it's about because I really respect films that market themselves that way. There's a little ambiguity, so you go into it forming your own opinion and not having seen the movie. So, but this is like that midsummer type uh, feel you get like there's something troubling about this movie. I don't even know if I want to watch it or not. Or Hereditary is like that too.
Mm.
It's got the kind of vibe for me.
I think I've talked to other people who've been worried to like kind of see it. For
Yeah.
me, I thought it was so exaggerated. It was more comedic, especially in like the third
Yeah.
act or the
Yeah.
end. But
Yeah.
I wasn't too disturbed by it. It had a different tone than those other movies, and I
It
think
had yeah.
that context changes it.
Really? Okay.
It's really disturbing for about 20 minutes, and then the last 15 gonzo minutes of the movie, you realize it's a morality tale.
Cool. All right. Well, you guys have got me intrigued. I'm going to put that on the list. I have 2 weeks off now, so I got plenty of time for movies. So that's what I'm going to do. All right. So my final pick for 1994 is The Shawshank Redemption. I don't make no apologies about liking this film. I just did. I even like the short story, the novella from Stephen King from different seasons. I read that book as, 13-year-old kid, and I always gravitated towards this story. It was one of those things I saw. Actually, it's again just me and my wife saw a lot of movies when we were recording. This was the third movie we saw together, but we saw it the night after we saw a quiz show. But it was one of those films where it was emblematic of like 40s Hollywood. It seemed like an old soul type movie where it's just you got the prison drama thing and you got the performance by Clancy Brown and Tim Robbins' performance here is just he ages very well without a lot of makeup or Hollywood aging. He it's more about his personality, how he his age is through his demeanor and his attitude and all that kind of stuff. But Morgan Freeman and those characters are phenomenal. And just the story arc, it's just a traditional classic American type thing. I guess that's my theme tonight. But the 90s seem to capture those things very well. And it's one of those things where I just, that's a comfort movie for me. Yeah, if it's on TV, I'll usually just leave it there and just watch whatever scene happens to be. And get just so many memories attached to that and a great ending. So you can't beat that either. So that's my number one pick from 1994.
Great
A
choice.
total bomb. No one liked it, but it's one of those movies that time has been very, very good to it. So we'll talk about it here as we wrap it up. So, all right, Mike, let's go back to the well one more time with those marvelous '80s and hit
All
your number one
right.
pick.
Bear with me as I read a list of honorable mentions.
Uh,
Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom, Beverly Hills Cop, Gremlins, The Terminator, Karate Kid, Red Dawn, Footloose, 16 Candles, Purple Rain, Splash, Amadeus, and ironically, 1984. So they're
Wow.
movies it's crazy how many good movies came out that year. But number one for me is a sleeper movie that would not appear on that list. It's called A Blood Simple.
Look at you go. All right.
It was a movie I didn't see at the time. I saw it. Actually watched it after I saw Big Lebowski,
Yeah.
ironically enough. And it's basically the Coen brothers' first movie they did, and it's kind of their take on a film noir movie that you would have seen in the 40s, 50s of like a murder mystery, but it's not really a mystery as much as it's just this really kind of like I don't know. It's like a mix of a William Faulkner novel with a film noir from Humphrey Bogart.
Right.
It has just the ends. It's Frances McDormand's first movie, and she's really good in it. It's kind of the femme fatale who's stuck in the middle in an affair. And I don't want to give away too much. It's one of those movies I just think people should really see because it's you can tell it's a first movie for somebody, but it's so well done that
Yeah.
you don't care about the low budget and even like the character. The only character you're going to recognize is Dan Hedaya from Cheers and
Uh-huh.
Cousin Eddie or whatever. Not he wasn't Cousin Eddie. I forgot his name. He was Eddie LeBeck, and he was like I forgot his name in Cheers, but anyway, he was the sleazy guy.
Yeah.
He ended up having his own sitcom
That's
with
right.
Casey Kasem's wife. Wow, that was a tangent. Sorry.
Wow.
But anyway, Blood Simple, the Coen brothers, great mystery movie. And like I say, it's fantastic and the best movie from 1984 for me.
All right. That's great. Mike, your list was way cooler than mine. I got to hand it to you. Well done, sir. I went commercial. You went deep. Deeper cuts win. So,
They were just the first ones that came to mind. Like I said, 2010. I just remember liking it because of just repetition
yeah.
of seeing it. I was like, this is a good movie, right? This is a good movie.
Damn it.
Damn it.
Yeah. All right. So that's our little take on generational perspectives on our favorite movies. So Kevin, when you're doing your podcast in 2054, you can take this little snippet and see if these movies hold up after 30 years. So I loved your list. There's a couple that I haven't seen that I've been meaning to see, but give me your perspective and your viewpoint. I'm certainly going to give them a whirl. But the common theme here is that good is good, and one of the things that I hope Hollywood makes a comeback when the younger generations start to understand this is that there are great movies from the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s.
Yeah.
So and that's where I think, Kevin, you're a little bit ahead of the curve for your generation, at least, because you're exposing yourself to all these great films, and it's something that I think me and Mike need to explore as well. We get a little pigeonholed in our little genre, and that we think movies aren't as good anymore. It's the premise of our podcast, but every once in a while something will crack through, and I think the five that you picked here certainly merit that. So the whole point of this conversation was just kind of see who can break through, and I'm guessing, Kevin, you've probably seen most of our movies, but if not, we hope we triggered some initiated
Yeah,
some.
there's a couple like
Yeah.
Romance in the Stone. I haven't seen that in
Yeah.
years. I almost forgot about that movie, so I need to go back and revisit that one for sure. Yeah.
Well, that's the point. And again, I think formats like Letterboxd are important because it gets people talking. It's a social, by definition, it's a social platform to get people considering other films. And when you can present your case, or that helps people through. And I'm hoping that generates some sort of interest in film
Yeah.
for generations to come, because it's really important to do. Well, guys, we have run very, very long, but I don't care. It was a lot of fun. We're passionate people talking about movies. I think that's the best way I could possibly spend an hour, so I don't care. So let's talk about a little bit about our show. So if you like what you heard today, you can check us out on our Instagram page. That's at Grumpy Nostalgia. You can send us an email at nostalgiagrumps@gmail.com. Do not check out our YouTube channel. Please stay away from it. We've got the cobwebs, the tumbleweeds, exactly where we want them. Any activity. uh, yeah, it's not take it up. But we're on YouTube as well. If you want to check out some audio versions of our podcast, we've got a few extended edition video companions that help out. So if you want to check that out, feel free. If you're on our webpage, you'll notice under the title of the episode, there's a send us a message link. We'd appreciate if you click on that and send us your take on how we felt about the episode. We'd love to hear from you. Check out Kevin. He's Kevin the Movie Guy on Instagram. We'll send links out to his
Kevin the Movie Guy.
in the description. He's got 6 times as many followers as we do, Mike, so he's in good shape there. You can link in the description on his Instagram page to his Letterboxd account. But it's box.it/107H9 if you don't want to go through all that trouble. But you can check out the plethora of, it's got itemized reviews of all the stuff he's checked out, plus a movie count of all the movies he's checked out so far. And it's just I spent an afternoon on it when we were courting him on the show, and I couldn't have been more impressed. So he's got some good stuff. You got a good thing going there, Kevin. Just keep it going, and
Thank you.
Keep the scene alive.
Thank you so much.
So we hope you had some element of fun joining us today, and realize that it wasn't the most professional podcast you'll ever be on. But
No, this was a blast. Yeah,
great.
Thank you so much for having me on.
We couldn't be happier to have you, and we really enjoyed your take on things, and we certainly hope you would consider coming back.
I'd love to. Yeah.
Me and Mike's egos are so fragile that we generally are a little intimidated by people that know more than we do, but we're going to try to work on that as well. So if we need a case for a guest, you're in line.
You give me far too much credit. I think of myself just like as an enthusiast, maybe just one level above someone who's kind of just paying attention. There's a lot of stuff I have not seen, but just about finding the stuff that you like and sharing it with people.
That's well said. So that's kind of what we do on our podcast, right, Mike?
That's right. We're one level above them in Amoeba.
That's right. All right, guys. So this is going to end it this will be the final show of 2024.
Wow.
This will come out in a couple. I think just a little bit before Christmas. So we're not going to take any time off over the holidays. We're going to get right back on it beginning the first of the year. We got big plans for 2025, and hopefully Kevin will be a part of that as well. So that's going to kind of wrap it up. So Mike, anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
No, I got to go work on a sex farm.
Plowing through your bean field, Mike. All right, so for Mike, James, and Kevin, this is Justin, and we will see you again next time. Happy holidays, everybody.
Everybody be cool. You be cool.